In the medieval imagination, the convent was a sanctuary, a fortress of purity, where women devoted their lives to God behind stone cloisters and vows of silence. But from Yorkshire to Rome, records reveal that daily life for many nuns was far more complex and far less obedient than most expected. Not all who entered the veil stayed behind it in spirit. At the heart of convent life was strict regulation. Caesarius of Alls, writing around 512, described nuns as gems of the church, cloistered to guard against the spiritual wolves of the outside world. His Regula Virginum laid out their lives in precise detail, rising before dawn for prayer, keeping modest dress, avoiding vanity and chatter. Meals were sparse, voices hushed, movements confined. The enclosure was not just physical, it was spiritual discipline, a lifelong vow. But reality did not always reflect this ideal. Over time, some houses of religion drifted into disorder. By 1298, Pope Boniface VIII issued the Decree Periculoso, commanding all nuns to remain perpetually cloistered. The wording was stark: nuns must be protected from occasions for lasciviousness, and their nunnish modesty must be preserved. It was a defensive measure against temptation, against scandal, and perhaps against something already happening. Hidden within the quiet halls of some convents, forbidden acts unfolded. In the case of the Wotton Priory in 12th century Yorkshire, one young nun, according to Ellard of Rievaulx, went out a virgin of Christ and soon returned an adulteress. She had taken a lover, likely a lay brother, and was said to be pregnant. What followed was a dramatic mix of punishment, escape, and eventual forgiveness, recorded by Ellard not as a warning, but a miracle. Even so, it exposed the fragile line between sanctity and human desire. And at Littlemore Priory in 16th century England, the veil tore completely. In 1517, ecclesiastical investigators uncovered a torrent of violations. The prioress Catherine Wells had borne a child with the convent chaplain and used church funds for the dowry. Nuns were imprisoned in stocks, punished, or openly rebelled. One even burned her way free, and another confessed, "I am ashamed to be here under the evil rule of my lady." These were not whispered rumors, they were official records from church visitation transcripts, entered into formal comperta. Yet even in disorder, daily rhythms remained, psalms sung, manuscripts copied, bread baked. Most nuns did not break their vows. But when they did, it was not always with noise, it was often in silence, under cover of darkness, in locked rooms or letters smuggled through iron grills. Behind the veil, life was never only about virtue. It was about control, of space, of thought, of the female body. And where control is harshest, resistance is never far behind. Convent dungeons, the secret trials behind cloistered walls. A woman vanishes from her convent in the dead of night. No crowd witnesses her departure. No records name her captors, only a single phrase in a legal roll, taken by persons unknown. But what happened within the cloistered walls before she disappeared remains unwritten, and it is there, in the silence, that the shadow of the convent dungeon begins to take shape. In medieval Europe, convents were spaces of prayer, isolation, and obedience. But they could also become spaces of punishment, places where transgression, whether imagined or real, was met not with public trial, but with secret correction. The walls that shielded virtue could just as easily conceal coercion. In 1304, at the Benedictine Priory of Clementhorpe in Yorkshire, a nun named Cecilia was reportedly taken by night. The record is terse: she was removed along with goods, and the culprits unnamed. 2 years later, at the Cistercian convent of Kirklees, another woman, Elizabeth de Hopton, was seized under similar circumstances. In both cases, the official entry in the king's justice roll suggests not scandalous elopement, but covert abduction. And where convents held their own rules of discipline, one must ask, were these women trying to escape imprisonment within? Centuries later, the mythos of the convent dungeon would explode into public imagination with Awful Disclosures 1836, a sensational work by Maria Monk. She claimed that within the walls of a Canadian convent, nuns were held in underground chambers, punished, silenced, and erased. Her vivid tales of secret trials and torture gripped the public, stoking waves of anti-Catholic fear across North America. The book was widely discredited, but its resonance reveals something deeper, a lasting suspicion that what happened behind cloistered doors could never be fully known. Modern historians warn us not to conflate the mythical oubliette, a dungeon of no return, with the lived realities of convent discipline. Yet the concept lingers. Even today, the idea of secret confinement in religious life captures the uneasy balance between piety and power. In truth, many convents had no dungeons at all. But others, especially those with wealthy patrons or powerful bishops, may have had private chambers used for correction, for silence, or simply for forgetting. The hair. Shearing ritual, a symbol of dishonor. She kneels in silence. Her head is bowed. And in a single deliberate motion, the blade scrapes across her scalp, stripping away not just hair, but status, dignity, and identity. In the medieval world, to cut a woman's hair was never just about appearance. It was a ritual. And in many cases, it was a sentence. Hair was more than ornament. It was a symbol of honor, chastity, and even power. Among Frankish royalty, uncut hair was a mark of dynastic legitimacy. To shear a prince's locks was to strip him of the right to rule. But within the walls of convents, and in the hidden rituals of correction, the same gesture became something darker. The Merovingian chronicles tell of royal women entering religious life through the ceremonial cutting of hair. In one such case, a mother, renouncing worldly ambitions for her daughter, seized iron shears and shaped her child's hair into a crown, a gesture of sanctity. This was not shame, but sacred dedication. Yet in other contexts, the blade told a different story. Medieval legal records and ecclesiastical accounts reveal that hair shearing could be a punishment, a mark of disgrace dealt to nuns who violated their vows. Though rarely detailed explicitly, scholars have traced a pattern. Women accused of sexual misconduct or rebellion might be forcibly tonsured, not in a holy rite, but in a punitive gesture designed to humiliate. This is echoed in legal codes and penitential practices, where a married woman accused of adultery might be forced to appear with her hair disheveled or removed, signaling moral failure. Hair, once braided as a symbol of virtue, became a canvas for dishonor. But even here, meanings collided. In the early Christian church, tonsure, shaving the crown or clipping the sides, was sacred. It was called the double crown, a mark of devotion to Christ. For monks and nuns alike, the act signified renunciation of vanity and the world. A paradox emerged: the same blade could sanctify or disgrace, depending on who held it and why. In the end, the hair shearing ritual was not about the hair itself. It was about control of the body, of the soul, and of how one's story would be told. And once the hair fell to the stone floor, it rarely grew back with the same meaning. Across centuries, the convent was not merely a sanctuary, it was a battleground of obedience and defiance, silence and judgment. Within cloistered walls, sacred rituals could become punishments, and the symbols of faith could turn into instruments of control. The veil, the stocks, the shears, each held meanings that shaped not only the fate of individual women, but the moral architecture of entire societies. These hidden acts did more than discipline bodies, they wrote history in silence. How should we interpret the line between sanctity and suppression, when the very rituals of devotion were used to punish dissent? Comment below. As the papal Decretal Periculoso warned in 1298, nuns were to remain perpetually cloistered, that their hearts and bodies might be safeguarded in complete chastity. But when walls grow too high, even devotion can become a cage.